The rain hit Emily's face like needles, each drop carrying the metallic scent of the city's exhaust, and something darker. Something that made her stomach clench as she knelt beside the overturned sedan. Steam rose from the crumpled hood, mixing with her breath in the October cold. Glass fragments sparkled across the asphalt like broken stars, and through the spider-webbed windshield she could see him. Blood. So much blood it pooled beneath her knees, soaking through her torn jeans. The man's breathing came in shallow gasps, his expensive suit torn and darkening with each pulse of his heart. Emily's hands trembled as she pressed her delivery jacket against the gash on his forehead, the fabric immediately saturating. "Stay with me," she whispered, though she wasn't sure why. She should call 911. Should flag down one of the few cars still moving through this industrial stretch of Queens at 2 a.m. Instead, she found herself checking his pulse, feeling the erratic flutter against her fingertips. His eyes opened, pale gray like winter sky, and focused on her with startling intensity despite the trauma. When he tried to speak, blood frothed at the corner of his mouth. "Don't talk." Emily fumbled for her phone, but it had shattered when she'd thrown herself from her delivery bike. The motorcycle lay twisted against a lamppost 10 feet away, its headlight casting fractured shadows across the scene. "I'm going to get help." But even as she said it, she could hear the distant wail of sirens growing fainter, not closer. They were heading somewhere else, to some other emergency in a city full of them. The man's grip tightened on her wrist with surprising strength. "No hospitals," he managed, his voice rough as gravel. Emily stared at him. Blood loss was making him delirious. Had to be. But something in those gray eyes stopped her from arguing. She'd seen enough desperation in her own mirror to recognize it in someone else. The crash had been sudden, inexplicable. One moment she'd been racing through empty streets to make her last delivery of the night, Chinese takeout that would barely cover her rent. And the next, the black sedan had careened across 3 lanes like something had spooked the driver. No other cars involved. No obvious cause. Now, watching this stranger struggle for each breath, Emily felt the familiar tug of responsibility that had defined her entire 24 years. The same instinct that had made her work 3 jobs to pay for her mother's medical bills. The same compulsion that kept her sending money to her landlord instead of buying groceries. "You're losing too much blood," she said, pressing harder against the head wound. Her jacket was completely soaked now, useless. "I need to... please." The word came out as barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of genuine fear. Not fear of dying. Emily had heard that before, in hospital waiting rooms. This was something else. Fear of being found. The sirens had faded completely now, swallowed by the city's endless noise. Rain continued to fall, washing pink streams of diluted blood toward the storm drains. Emily's own clothes were soaked through, her dark hair plastered to her skull, but she barely noticed the cold anymore. She looked at the man's gray pallor, at the way his breathing was becoming more labored. Without medical attention, he would die here on this empty street. But something about his desperation, about the way he'd said please, made her hesitate to ignore his plea. "My blood type," she said suddenly, remembering the donor card in her wallet. "I'm O-negative. Universal donor." His eyes sharpened. "What are you saying?" Emily wasn't entirely sure herself. The idea was insane, dangerous, probably illegal. But she'd grown up watching her mother work as a battlefield medic, had absorbed enough emergency medicine through osmosis to know the basics of field transfusion. "I'm saying I can help you, but not here." She glanced around the empty street at the industrial buildings that offered no shelter, no safety. "Where can I take you?" For a moment he just stared at her. Then, with tremendous effort, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. The screen was cracked but functional. He pressed a single speed dial number. "Dimitri," he said when someone answered. "I need extraction, Queens. Industrial district off." He looked at Emily questioningly. Van Dam Street, she supplied. Near the old brewery. Van Dam, come alone. He ended the call and let the phone drop. Help will be here soon. How long? Emily asked, watching his color fade moment by moment. 10 minutes. Maybe 15. Emily did the math in her head. Blood loss, shock, possible internal injuries. He didn't have 15 minutes. And she'd already committed herself to this stranger's survival with a certainty that surprised her. My bike has a first aid kit, she said, rising carefully to avoid slipping on the blood-slicked pavement. Basic supplies, but better than nothing. The motorcycle's storage compartment had survived the crash. Inside, she found the military-grade medical kit her mother had given her years ago, bulky, comprehensive, designed for battlefield conditions. Emily had never expected to use it for anything more serious than scraped knees. When she returned to his side, the man was watching her with those unsettling gray eyes. What's your name? Emily hesitated. Smart people didn't give their names to bleeding strangers who refused hospitals. But as she knelt in his blood, preparing to quite literally give part of herself to keep him alive, normal precautions seemed absurd. Emily Mitchell. William, he said. William Anderson. The name meant nothing to her, but something in the way he said it suggested it should. Emily focused instead on opening the medical kit, her hands steadier now that she had a purpose. Inside were sterile, needles, tubing, bags, everything needed for emergency transfusion. This is going to hurt, she warned, swabbing the inside of her elbow with alcohol. Both of us. William's laugh was barely audible, more of an exhale than actual sound. Pain I can handle. Emily inserted the needle into her own vein first, watching her blood flow dark red through the clear tubing. The sight made her dizzy for a moment, not from squeamishness, but from the sheer surreal nature of what she was doing. Giving her blood to a complete stranger on a rain-soaked street in the middle of the night. When she turned to insert the other needle into William's arm, she noticed something that made her freeze. Peeking from his jacket pocket was her student ID, somehow displaced from her wallet during the chaos of the crash. The plastic card was smeared with his blood, her photo barely visible beneath the dark stain. William followed her gaze and saw what she was staring at. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he reached for the ID with trembling fingers, wiping away enough blood to make out her full name and university affiliation. Emily Mitchell, he repeated, but this time differently. Like recognition. Like memory. Your mother? Was she Sarah Mitchell? Army medic? Emily's breath caught. Her mother had died 3 years ago, cancer taking what the war couldn't touch. But how could this stranger possibly know about her military service? How do you... She saved my life, William said softly. Afghanistan, 2003. I was 17. Stupid. Caught in crossfire during a supply run. She pulled me out of a burning Humvee. The words hung in the rain-soaked air between them. Emily stared at his blood-streaked face, trying to reconcile this revelation with the impossibility of their meeting. Her mother had saved dozens of soldiers during her deployment. The odds of Emily encountering one of them like this were astronomical, unless it wasn't coincidence at all. She never talked about the war, Emily said finally, watching her blood flow into his veins through the makeshift transfusion line. Said it wasn't something you brought home. Smart woman. But she was wrong about one thing. William's breathing was becoming easier as the blood loss stabilized. Sometimes the war follows you home anyway. Before Emily could ask what he meant, headlights swept across the street. A black SUV pulled up with military precision, and 2 men in dark clothes emerged. They moved like soldiers, like people accustomed to violence and emergency. Mr. Anderson, the taller one said, his accent vaguely Eastern European. We need to move you now. Dimitri. William's voice was stronger now, though still weak. This is Emily Mitchell. She's coming with us. Emily started to protest, But Dimitri was already lifting her carefully, mindful of the transfusion line still connecting her to William. "No hospitals?" he said in that same accented voice. "Too dangerous. We have medical facility." As they loaded both her and William into the SUV, Emily caught a glimpse of the crashed sedan one last time. In the red glow of the vehicle's taillights, she could see something she'd missed before: bullet holes in the rear bumper. Someone had been shooting at William Anderson before he crashed. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, as the SUV pulled away from the scene, Emily found herself studying William's face in the dim interior light. The resemblance was there now that she looked for it. The same stubborn jaw, the same deep-set eyes she remembered from old photographs of her mother's unit. "She kept pictures," Emily said quietly. "From Afghanistan. You're in some of them, aren't you? The young soldier with the gray eyes?" William nodded slowly. "She wrote to me for a while after I came home. Wanted to make sure I was adjusting. Good woman. Your mother." "She was." Emily felt tears threaten but pushed them back. "She would have helped you tonight too, you know? Even knowing..." "Knowing what?" Emily looked at Dimitri in the driver's seat, at the second man riding shotgun with his hand resting on what was obviously a concealed weapon, at the expensive interior of the SUV and the way other traffic seemed to give them a wide berth despite the speed. "Knowing exactly what kind of help you're going to need?" Dimitri's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and Emily saw something like approval there. Or maybe warning. It was hard to tell the difference. The transfusion line between her and William pulsed with each heartbeat, a literal connection that seemed to symbolize something larger. Her blood flowing into his veins, his gratitude binding them together in ways she was only beginning to understand. As the SUV navigated through Queens toward whatever medical facility Dimitri had mentioned, Emily realized her life had just changed irrevocably. The delivery driver who'd been scrambling to make rent 12 hours ago was gone. In her place sat someone connected to William Anderson by blood and circumstance. Someone whose mother's legacy had reached across decades to place her exactly where she needed to be. The city lights blurred past the tinted windows, and Emily felt a strange sense of inevitability settling over her. Whatever came next, whatever danger had put bullet holes in William's car, she was part of it now. "There's something else," William said, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "Something you need to know about why I was being..." His words were cut off by the sharp crack of gunfire somewhere behind them. Dimitri cursed in what sounded like Russian and pressed harder on the accelerator. The second man was already reaching for his weapon, speaking rapidly into a radio. Emily instinctively leaned toward William, her protective instincts overriding rational fear. The transfusion line pulled taut between them as the SUV took a hard turn, tires screaming, against wet pavement. "What's happening?" she managed to ask. William's gray eyes met hers in the dim light, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold. Not fear, acceptance. Like this was exactly what he'd been expecting all along. "They found us," he said simply. "Who found..." The rear window exploded. The rear window exploded in a shower of safety glass that filled the SUV's interior like deadly snow. Emily threw herself across William instinctively, her body shielding him as fragments rained down on them both. The transfusion line pulled tight, and she felt the sharp tug of the needle in her arm as another bullet punched through the headrest where William's head had been moments before. "Stay down!" Dimitri shouted, yanking the wheel hard left as the SUV careened around a corner on two wheels. The engine roared as they accelerated through a red light, other cars scattering like startled birds. Emily's face was pressed against William's chest, and she could feel his heart hammering against her cheek. His blood, her blood now too, flowing between them through the IV line, pounded with adrenaline and fear. The medicinal smell of the first aid supplies mixed with gunpowder and the metallic scent of fresh bleeding from where glass had cut her shoulders. "How many?" William called to the front seat, his voice steady despite their circumstances. 2 vehicles, the second man replied without looking back. His name was Sergei, Emily realized, catching fragments of rapid Russian between him and Dmitri. Black sedans, professional grade. Another burst of gunfire erupted behind them, and Emily felt the SUV shudder as bullets found their mark in the rear bumper. The acrid smell of burning rubber filled the vehicle as one of their tires began to shred. "The safe house is compromised," Dmitri said grimly. "Someone knew exactly where to find us." William's grip tightened on Emily's shoulder. Even wounded and losing blood, his touch was surprisingly gentle. "Inside job." The words carried a weight Emily didn't fully understand, but she could feel the tension they created in the vehicle's confined space. Betrayal. Someone William trusted had given away their location. "Can we lose them?" Emily asked, lifting her head enough to see their pursuers through the shattered rear window. 2 sleek sedans weaved through traffic behind them, closing distance with predatory efficiency. "Not with a blown tire," Sergei said. "We need to—" His words were cut off as the SUV lurched violently to the right. Dmitri fought for control, but the damaged tire finally gave way completely. They mounted the curb with a bone-jarring impact that sent Emily's teeth clicking together and made the transfusion bag swing wildly between her and William. The SUV skidded to a stop against a fire hydrant in front of a 24-hour laundromat. Steam rose from the engine, and Emily could hear the hiss of escaping coolant. Through the pucked laundromat's fluorescent-lit windows, she glimpsed a few late-night customers staring out at them with the detached curiosity of people accustomed to urban violence. "Move," Dmitri commanded, already out of the driver's seat with a pistol in his hand. "Back exit, now." Emily started to disconnect the transfusion line, but William caught her wrist. "Leave it. We stay connected until we reach safety." The logic was sound. William still needed her blood, but it meant they would have to move as one unit, awkward and vulnerable. As Sergei hauled the back door open, Emily could see the pursuing sedans rounding the corner, their headlights cutting through the rain like searchlights. "This way," Dmitri said, gesturing toward the narrow alley beside the laundromat. "Stay low." Emily found herself half carrying William as they stumbled into the alley, the IV line stretched between them like an umbilical cord. His color was better now. The transfusion had worked, but he was still weak from blood loss and trauma. Behind them, car doors slammed and voices shouted in accented English. The alley reeked of garbage and stagnant water. Emily's feet splashed through puddles she couldn't see in the darkness, and something soft and unpleasant squelched under her delivery boots. William's breathing was labored beside her, each step clearly costing him significant effort. "Who are they?" Emily whispered as they pressed deeper into the maze of service alleys behind Queen's industrial buildings. "Competition," William replied grimly. "Or former associates. Hard to tell the difference sometimes." They reached a junction where the alley branched in 3 directions. Dmitri paused, listening. Emily could hear their pursuers searching, flashlight beams probing the darkness behind them. Closer now. "This way," Sergei said, indicating the narrow passage to their left. But as they started to move, Emily caught sight of something that made her freeze. A figure silhouetted against the mouth of the alley they'd just exited. Tall, lean, wearing an expensive coat despite the rain. Even in the poor light, something about his posture seemed familiar. "William," the figure called out, his voice carrying easily through the humid air. "There's no point running. You know how this ends." William went rigid beside Emily. Through the IV line connecting them, she could feel his pulse spike with recognition and something deeper. Betrayal. "Anton," William breathed. "Son of a bitch." The name meant nothing to Emily, but William's reaction told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't random violence or business competition. This was personal. "You know him," she said. It wasn't a question. "My cousin," William replied, his voice flat with controlled rage. My business partner. My oldest friend. Anton stepped into the alley and Emily could see him more clearly now. Handsome in a cold way, with the same gray eyes as William but none of the warmth she'd glimpsed during their strange connection. He held a pistol loosely at his side, not threatening yet, but ready. Bring the girl, William. She's not part of this. She is now, William called back, his voice carrying a note of protective finality that made Emily's chest tighten with something she couldn't name. Because she has your blood in her veins? Anton laughed, the sound echoing off brick walls. That's poetic, cousin. Mother would have appreciated the symbolism. Dmitri and Sergei flanked Emily and William now, weapons drawn but held low. They were outnumbered, Emily realized. Anton wouldn't have come alone, and her earlier glimpse of 2 sedans suggested at least 6 or 8 hostile personnel. What does he want? Emily whispered. William's jaw tightened. Everything I have. Everything I am. He's been planning this for months, probably years. The betrayal explained the precise timing of the attack, the knowledge of their route, the compromise of their safe house. Anton had orchestrated William's assassination attempt and was now cleaning up loose ends. She saved your life, Anton, William called out, stepping slightly in front of Emily despite his weakness. That should mean something. It means she's seen too much, Anton replied. Heard too much. You involved her the moment you accepted her blood. Emily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October rain. She was a liability now, a witness to family betrayal and attempted murder. In Anton's world, witnesses didn't walk away. There's another option, William said, his voice taking on a different quality. Harder, more authoritative. Emily glimpsed the man he must be in his professional life, the one who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. You let her go. Right now. Clean slate. And you? William was quiet for a long moment. Emily could feel him thinking, calculating, weighing options with the measured consideration of someone accustomed to life and death decisions. We settle this like family, he said finally. Just you and me. William? No, Emily said instinctively. He was still weak, still recovering. Anton looked uninjured, fresh, ready for violence. She's right to worry, Anton said with mock sympathy. You're in no condition to fight me, cousin, but I appreciate the gesture. Movement at the far end of the alley caught Emily's attention. More figures approaching, cutting off their retreat. Anton's reinforcements had flanked them while they talked. Time's up, Anton announced. Both of you, step into the light, slowly. Dmitri and Sergei exchanged glances. Emily could see them calculating odds, considering desperate measures. But with William wounded and her connected to him by the transfusion line, they had no good options. Do it, William said quietly to his men. Stand down. Sir. Dmitri started to protest. Stand down, William repeated with quiet authority. To Emily, he said, whatever happens next, remember that your mother saved my life once. Now you've saved it again. That debt runs both ways. They emerged from the alley into the fuller light of the street. Anton waited with 3 other men, all armed, all professional. Emily recognized the type from her mother's stories about private military contractors. Expensive, efficient, utterly without conscience. Disconnect the transfusion, Anton ordered. Emily began to reach for the IV line, but William caught her hand. Not yet. I'm still bleeding internally. Another few minutes. It was a lie. Emily could tell from his improved color and steady breathing that the immediate crisis had passed. But she understood what he was really saying. As long as they remained physically connected, Anton would be reluctant to separate them. It bought time, if nothing else. Fine, Anton said impatiently. But make it quick. We have a schedule to keep. One of Anton's men approached with cable ties, professional restraints, not improvised solutions. Emily felt her last hope of escape evaporating as the plastic tightened around her wrists. Where are you taking us? She asked. Anton smiled, and Emily finally understood what William had meant about the war following him home. This wasn't just family betrayal or business rivalry. This was something deeper, more vicious. The kind of violence her mother had tried to leave behind in Afghanistan. "Somewhere private," Anton said. "Somewhere we can discuss William's retirement in detail." As they were loaded into one of the black sedans, Emily caught William's eye. He was looking at her with something like apology, like regret, for involving her in his dangerous world. But beneath that, she saw something else. A cold calculation that reminded her he hadn't survived this long in his profession through luck alone. The sedan pulled away from the laundromat, its tires hissing against wet pavement. Emily watched Queens blur past the window and realized she was no longer Emily Mitchell, delivery driver. She was Emily Mitchell, witness. Emily Mitchell, leverage. Emily Mitchell, whose blood now flowed in the veins of one of the most dangerous men in New York. The transfusion line still connected them, a literal bond that seemed to pulse with shared heartbeat. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "Your mother," William said quietly, his voice barely audible over the engine noise. "She ever tell you about the worst day of her deployment?" Emily nodded. Her mother had mentioned it once, during a late-night conversation fueled by too much wine and too many memories. "IED attack. Lost half her unit." "She saved who she could," William continued. "But afterwards, she said something I never forgot. Sometimes the people you save don't stay saved. Sometimes they drag you down with them." Emily met his gaze in the dim interior of the sedan. "Are you warning me off?" "I'm telling you that you still have a choice. When we get wherever we're going, if you get a chance to run, take it." "And leave you?" William's smile was sad and tired and somehow beautiful in its resignation. "Your mother would understand." But Emily was already shaking her head. The choice had been made the moment she knelt in his blood on that rain-soaked street. The moment she connected her life to his through needle and tube and shared circulation. "No," she said simply. "We're connected now. That means something." Outside the sedan's windows, New York City rushed past in a blur of light and shadow. Emily could feel her heartbeat synchronized with William's through the IV line, two rhythms becoming one as they were carried deeper into whatever darkness Anton had planned. The war her mother had tried to leave behind had found its way into Emily's life after all. But unlike her mother, Emily wasn't running from it. She was running toward whatever came next, blood and courage flowing between her and the gray-eyed man who'd already changed everything she thought she knew about herself. The sedan turned onto a darker street, away from the main thoroughfares. Through the partition, Emily could see Anton speaking quietly into his phone, making arrangements she probably didn't want to understand. "Whatever happens," William said, his voice so low only she could hear. "Remember that some debts can only be paid in blood. Your mother taught me that." Before Emily could ask what he meant, the sedan slowed to a stop. They had arrived at their destination, a warehouse district where the city's lights seemed dimmer, more scattered. Where screams would echo off empty buildings and never be heard. Anton opened the door personally, like a courteous host welcoming guests. "Welcome to your retirement party, cousin. I do hope you'll find the accommodations satisfactory." As they were escorted toward the warehouse entrance, Emily felt the weight of her mother's legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Sarah Mitchell had saved William Anderson 20 years ago in a war zone half a world away. Now her daughter was bound to him by blood and circumstance in another kind of war zone, one where family betrayed family and mercy was a luxury few could afford. The warehouse door closed behind them with brutal finality, cutting off the last of the streetlight. In the darkness that followed, Emily heard the sound that would haunt her dreams. The unmistakable click of Anton chambering around. The real test was about to begin. Emily's wrists burned against the plastic restraints as Anton's men shoved her and William deeper into the warehouse. The space reeked of machine oil and rust, with pools of stagnant water reflecting the harsh light from a single overhead bulb that swayed in the drafts. The transfusion line still connected them, crimson and fragile, a lifeline that had become a leash. "Cut them loose," Anton ordered, gesturing at the IV tube. "The medical theater is over." One of his men approached with a knife, but William shifted protectively in front of Emily. "Careful with that blade, Marcus. Wouldn't want any accidents." Emily felt the sharp tug as the needle was yanked from her arm without ceremony. Blood welled from the puncture site, warm and sticky against her skin. The physical connection was severed, but something deeper remained, a synchronization of heartbeat and breath that the IV line had only made visible. Anton circled them like a predator, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor. 20 years I've waited for this moment, William. 20 years of playing second to my younger cousin, of watching you inherit what should have been mine. Father left the organization to me because you were weak, William replied, his voice steady despite their circumstances. He knew you'd run it into the ground within 6 months. The backhand came fast and brutal. Emily heard the crack of palm against cheek, saw William's head snap sideways. But he didn't fall, didn't even stumble. The gray eyes that met Anton's were cold as winter steel. "Still weak," William observed, tasting blood from his split lip. "Still hitting like a child having a tantrum." This time, Anton used his fist. The blow caught William in the ribs, and Emily heard the sharp intake of breath that meant pain. Real pain. William doubled forward slightly, and she saw the dark stain spreading across his shirt, where his original wounds had reopened. "Stop," Emily said, the word torn from her throat before she could stop it. Anton turned to her with genuine surprise. "The little delivery girl speaks. How refreshing." "He's injured. He needs medical attention." "He needs to die," Anton corrected pleasantly. The medical attention was just postponing the inevitable. Emily's mother had told her stories about interrogations, about the casual cruelty of people who had divorced themselves from basic humanity. But experiencing it firsthand was different. The smell of fear sweat mixing with rust and oil, the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, the way violence seemed to thicken the air itself. "The girl doesn't need to see this," William said quietly. "Oh, but she does." Anton pulled a chrome-plated pistol from his jacket. "She's seen too much already, heard too much. But I'm a reasonable man. I'll give her a choice." Emily felt ice forming in her stomach. Around the warehouse's perimeter, Anton's men shifted position, creating a loose circle with no exit. "Tell me everything William said in the ambulance," Anton continued. "Every word, every name, every detail of our family business. Do that, and I'll make your death quick. Refuse, and, well, there are other options." Emily's throat felt like sandpaper. "He didn't say anything. He was unconscious most of the time." "Liar." Anton's voice remained conversational, but the gun was now pointed directly at her chest. Dmitri reported radio chatter. "Conversations. William doesn't waste words, especially not when he's bleeding to death." "So what did he tell you?" The truth was that William had said very little. Fragments about her mother, acknowledgments of debt, expressions of gratitude. Nothing that would compromise his organization or reveal its secrets. But Emily realized it didn't matter what she said. Anton had already decided she knew too much simply by existing in William's orbit. "He talked about my mother," she said finally. "About how she saved his life during the war." "Touching. What else?" Emily glanced at William, whose slight shake of the head confirmed what she already suspected. There was no right answer here, no combination of words that would buy their freedom. "Nothing else?" she lied. Anton sighed theatrically. "Marcus, would you please encourage Ms. Mitchell to be more forthcoming?" The man named Marcus stepped forward with a knife that gleamed wickedly in the warehouse's harsh light. Emily tried to pull back, but her restrained hands gave her no leverage. The blade touched her cheek, cold and sharp, drawing a thin line of blood. "Stop." William's voice cracked like a whip across the warehouse. "You want information? Ask me directly. Leave her out of this." "But where's the fun in that?" Anton asked. "Besides, she's leverage. As long as she's alive and in pain, you'll tell me everything I want to know." Emily felt the knife's point press deeper, felt warm blood track down her jaw. The pain was sharp and immediate. But what frightened her more was the casual way Marcus held the blade, like a craftsman comfortable with his tools. "Your mother was a medic, wasn't she?" Anton continued conversationally. "Saved lives for a living. I wonder if she taught you any of her skills." "Some," Emily admitted through gritted teeth. "Excellent. Then you'll know exactly what's happening as Marcus works. You'll understand precisely how much damage he's doing and how long you can survive it." This was psychological torture as much as physical. Using her medical knowledge to amplify her fear, Emily closed her eyes, trying to center herself the way her mother had taught her during childhood nightmares. "Think about your mother's worst day," Anton said, somehow reading her thoughts. "The IED attack. Half her unit dead, the other half screaming for help she couldn't provide. She told William about it, didn't she? During one of their conversations in the field hospital." Emily's eyes snapped open. "How do you know about that?" "Because I was there," Anton said with a cold smile. "Not at the attack. I was stateside, finishing my business degree while William played soldier. But I was there when he came home, when he told me about the brave American medic who'd saved his worthless hide." The knife twisted slightly, and Emily bit back a scream. But something else was happening. She could feel William's tension escalating, his breathing becoming more controlled. He was preparing for something. "Your mother made an impression on my cousin," Anton continued, "changed his perspective on certain things, made him soft, sentimental. It's a weakness I've been exploiting for years." "She saved his life," Emily said through clenched teeth. "She doomed him," Anton corrected. "Made him believe in mercy, in redemption, in all those pretty lies that have no place in our world. If she'd left him to die in that Afghan hospital, he'd have been spared what's coming next." William shifted almost imperceptibly, and Emily saw Dmitri and Sergei tense in her peripheral vision. They were still bound, still outnumbered, but something was happening. Some silent communication between William and his men. "Last chance," Anton said, pressing the gun barrel against Emily's temple. The metal was cold and smelled of gun oil. "Everything William told you, or Marcus starts removing pieces." Emily looked directly at William and saw him mouth a single word. "Duck." She didn't hesitate. Emily threw herself sideways just as the warehouse exploded into chaos. William had somehow worked his hands free from the cable ties. Emily glimpsed torn skin and blood where he'd sacrificed flesh for mobility, and was driving his shoulder into the nearest of Anton's men. Gunfire erupted in the confined space, deafeningly loud. Emily rolled behind a concrete support column as bullets sparked off metal and shattered the overhead bulb. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in hellish red. Emily heard Dmitri's voice roaring commands in Russian, heard the wet sound of blade meeting flesh, heard Marcus scream as Sergei appeared behind him like a vengeful ghost. The knife that had been at Emily's throat clattered across the floor, and she dove for it despite her bound hands. "William!" Anton's voice cut through the chaos. "This ends now." Emily peered around the column and saw Anton holding his pistol with both hands, tracking William's movement through the warehouse's maze of equipment. William was bleeding again. Emily could see dark stains spreading across his shirt, but he moved with deadly purpose. "You always were too sentimental, cousin," Anton called out. "Father saw it. I saw it. Even that American medic saw it." He fired twice, the muzzle flashes strobing in the red emergency light. William dove behind a pile of shipping crates, splinters exploding around him. "She couldn't save everyone that day in Afghanistan," Anton continued, his voice echoing off concrete walls. "Just like she can't save you now." Emily worked frantically at her restraints, using the dropped knife to saw through the plastic. The blade was slick with someone's blood. She couldn't tell whose in the chaos, but it was sharp enough to part the cable ties. Free, she grabbed the knife and began moving through the warehouse's shadows. She could hear William and Anton circling each other, their voices carrying the weight of 20 years of family history. "You killed him," William said from somewhere in the darkness. "Uncle Dmitri, he was family. He was weak. Like you. Like your precious American medic." Her name was Sarah Mitchell. "I don't care what her name was. She's dead. And soon you'll join her." Emily felt rage bloom hot in her chest. Her mother's name spoken with such casual contempt by a man who dealt in murder and betrayal. She moved closer to the sound of Anton's voice, the knife gripped tight in her bleeding hand. "Emily Mitchell saved your life tonight," William continued. "Just like her mother saved mine. That should count for something." "It counts for nothing. Family is blood, William. Everything else is just sentiment." Emily saw him then, silhouetted against the red emergency lighting. Anton was reloading his pistol, his attention focused on the shipping crates where he thought William was hiding. He didn't see Emily approaching from his blind side. She thought of her mother, working frantically to save lives in a field hospital while mortars fell around them. Thought of the debt that had somehow passed from mother to daughter, connecting their lives to William Anderson across decades and continents. Some debts could only be paid in blood. Emily struck fast and hard, the knife sliding between Anton's ribs with surgical precision. Her mother had taught her anatomy, had shown her where the vital organs lay beneath skin and muscle. The blade found its mark. Anton spun with a look of shock and outrage, his pistol swinging toward Emily. But William was already there, emerging from the shadows like avenging death. His hands closed around Anton's wrist, and Emily heard the sharp crack of breaking bone. The gun fell. Anton fell. The warehouse grew quiet except for the sound of labored breathing and emergency lighting humming overhead. "Is he dead?" Emily asked, looking down at Anton's still form. William checked for a pulse, his face grim in the red light. "No, but he will be soon." Emily felt something twist in her stomach. Guilt, relief, horror at what she'd done. She'd taken a life, or near enough. Crossed a line her mother had spent her career trying not to cross. "He would have killed us both," William said quietly, reading her expression. "You did what you had to do." Around the warehouse, Dmitri and Sergei were checking the other bodies. 2 of Anton's men were dead, 1 wounded but unconscious. The violence was over, but Emily could still feel it echoing in her bones. "Now what?" she asked. William looked at her for a long moment, and Emily saw something change in his gray eyes. A decision being made, a path chosen. "Now I keep my word to your mother," he said. "I get you somewhere safe." "What about your organization? Anton's betrayal?" "Anton is finished. The organization—" William paused, looking around the warehouse where family loyalty had turned to murder. "Maybe it's time for me to retire, really retire." Emily felt her heart skip. "What does that mean?" "It means I have enough money to disappear, to start over somewhere clean." He met her eyes. "It means I can give you the means to do the same. College, medical school, whatever future you want." "And what about your future?" William smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, it reached his eyes. "Maybe that depends on whether you'd want company. In this new life." Emily looked around the warehouse, at the blood, the bodies, the aftermath of violence that had nearly claimed them both. Then she looked at William, who'd killed for her, who'd been willing to die for her, who carried her mother's legacy in his own blood. "Ask me again when we're somewhere that doesn't smell like death," she said. His laugh was soft and genuine. "Deal." As they walked toward the warehouse exit, Emily felt the weight of transformation settling on her shoulders. She was no longer Emily Mitchell, delivery driver, struggling to pay rent in Queens. She wasn't even Emily Mitchell, witness to family betrayal and mob violence. She was Emily Mitchell, who had chosen blood over safety, who had chosen connection over escape, who had chosen to honor her mother's legacy by saving the life that Sarah Mitchell had saved 20 years ago in an Afghan field hospital. Outside the warehouse, dawn was breaking over New York City. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled clean and new. Emily took William's offered hand, feeling the strength in his fingers, the warmth of his skin against hers. They had work to do, police to avoid, explanations to craft, new lives to build from the ashes of the old ones. But for the first time in months, Emily felt something like hope blooming in her chest. Some debts could only be paid in blood, but sometimes, blood freely given could purchase something more valuable than money or power. Sometimes it could purchase redemption. They walked away from the warehouse together, their shadows long in the morning light, connected now by something deeper than transfusion lines or shared trauma, connected by choice, by courage, by the kind of love that her mother would have recognized and blessed. Behind them, Anton Urev bled out on the warehouse floor, his dreams of empire dying with him. Ahead lay uncertainty but also possibility, a future neither Emily nor William could have imagined 12 hours ago when she'd knelt in his blood on a rain-soaked Queen Street. The war was over. The healing could begin.